Well, hey there! Welcome to D&D, but this isn't Dungeons & Dragons, this is Dungeons & Don'ts, a series where we delve, where we spelunk into only the deepest and darkest dungeons. In this episode, we'll be spelunking into the dark and damp, dank cave of transient characters, a pitfall that many new and old players of D&D, as well as senior and novice fantasy writers fall into. But have no fear. For Mind Flayer Inc. is here. God, I need a new catchphrase. So what exactly are transient characters? Well, a transient character is quite simply a character that is transient in the world. Nothing actually connects them to the fantasy environment. Nothing grounds them and makes them people instead of characters. They have no why for their actions, no reason for their reasons, so to speak, but more on that later. Very typically, these are portrayed as drifters, possibly with no family, but this is due to not creating or thinking about it, and are very frequently just in it for the adventure or looking for wealth and glory, and that's literally it. Characters that are transient have a hard time connecting with the world's deeper threads and with the other PCs, if you're writing for a tabletop, and NPCs of your world. Sometimes a transient character can have goals, but they have shallow ones, with no reasoning behind it, no why. Without thought-out and grounded goals, without the foundations, they struggle to figure out why they're talking to people, why they're doing what they're doing. No goals makes it hard to figure out how they go about certain things. With such shallow goals, each interaction ends up being exactly the same or lacks consistency, shaking it up for the sake of shaking it up, so to speak. The biggest issue with these characters is that interest in the game or story fizzles out rather quickly, as their goals of getting rich and being famous don't hold up too well if they're constantly facing death or horrific acts in the world, and it can get boring playing a character with very little room for development as there is no foundation to develop off of. To put it simply, if there is no why to their goals, why do they do those things? Why do they want to talk to the mayor in this town, to this mob boss, to this grand wizard? To get money? Okay. But why? If there's no why, the goal compounds, and the character folds into an incredibly one-dimensional character who does things just for the sake of doing things. This doesn't have to be money. It can be whatever singular goal with no why in mind. You can view this through the lens of real life rather easily. Typically, when one speaks to someone or does something, they have a goal in mind. And that goal might have a penultimate goal of some sort that stretches off of that goal. For instance, going to work. You don't just go to work for the sake of going to work. You go there to get money. However, you get money so that you can do something else with that money. It isn't just simply to be rich, but it is specifically to pay rent, to pay your mortgage, to pay for food, what have you. So, in D&D, you must extrapolate on that a bit. Seeing as though most D&D characters don't have rent or mortgages, and they typically, in a lot of campaigns, don't even need to pay for food, you need to think of a reason why they're getting money, or why they need money, or why they are trying to get money that isn't, well, so that I can be rich. As a story demands more than that. A protagonist needs a deeper goal for it to be interesting. Not only in the case of D&D for the listener or the other players, but also for you as a player. Eventually, this singular goal of getting money will get boring, and you will want to develop. However, without the foundations, it can be hard to develop a character that has gone so long with so little development. Now, that's not to say that it's impossible. There are plenty of instances in real life in which people go down a certain path, and then they pivot, exponentially so, and they change as people. It is completely possible for a character to make a 180, so to speak, or begin to do things that they wouldn't typically do. It's just harder to make it organic if you don't think about these things beforehand. And transient characters have a particularly hard time reconnecting with the world because there was no connection to begin with. You know what I mean? So it isn't really reconnecting as much as it is connecting in the first place. And that can be rather difficult. So you want to think about this right off the bat. You want goals that really solidify your character's motivations. Motivations is a key concept here. This is the operative word, is motivation. What is your motivation for talking to the mayor? If your motivation is to get information about a certain task at hand and you want to be diplomatic about it because your goal requires it, then you're going to go about the role play or the mission a bit differently. Just as the paladin might talk to a lich differently than they'll talk to someone else that's good aligned, I guess, like another paladin, right? But it depends on the goals in mind. Perhaps the lich can offer something to the paladin that the other paladin cannot. So they go about achieving their goals differently with each person. You don't talk to your mother the same way that you talk to the grocery store clerk, so on and so forth. It is all about motivation. It's all about what you want out of the situation. And if you don't know what you want out of the situation, each situation that you go into from the perspective of this character is going to seem a little bit shallow and directionless. But having these one-dimensional goals is easy. And it may seem like this is the way to, quote, carefree and, quote, just for fun D&D. However, this is a fast track to getting bored really quickly. Would someone with that mentality ever have the drive it takes to continue in the face of such danger to begin with? Most people, when faced with one, let alone many, near-death experiences, would turn and run, especially if their goals were so material. What this does, in a lot of instances, is create cognitive dissonance. You want to continue playing your character, you want to continue having fun, and you don't want to shake up the party, right? You don't want to have the DM introduce a new character. You don't want to lose what storyline you do have because you spent maybe months, perhaps a year or more on this character, so you don't want to just scrap it and throw it away. So what ends up happening is that you begin to develop cognitive dissonance as it pertains to your character. A lot of the situations that you find yourself in, you'll convince are okay, even though you know as a real person that they're not. This person who just wants money and fame probably wouldn't go toe-to-toe with a beholder or risk their lives to save these people that they just met perhaps only a few months ago if their goals were material. Again, there's nothing wrong with a tragic backstory to really get some things rolling like that. But you may think, well, my world is all sunshine and rainbows then. That's fine and dandy, but why are there adventurers in need of doing dirty work then? And nearly all D&D adventures are dirty work, and very typically are either political intrigue, the definition of dirty work, or killing some terrifying monster. You have to remember that there must be a reason for the protagonist's existence, and that's the crux of a D&D story, a game that revolves around a story created by the party. On its face, it requires a reason for the party to exist. Now, having transient characters by definition is not bad. Traveling merchants, thieves, grifters, and so on can be great transient characters, but that's a type of character. And we're more talking about the essence of the character and how it's played, the foundations of it. Transient characters, in the way we are discussing them, are more transient due to their lack of any connection to the world, or many, if any, of the characters within it. You can have a loner character or loner characters that are compelling very easily. So how do you fix, or how do you go about fixing a transient character? Well, first of all, I went over all of the foundations that I believe create a more grounded character, especially in D&D and tabletop games. And I have a video that I'll link in the description that goes over all of that, as it's quite lengthy. I think that character creation is a passion of mine, so I discussed all of the initial foundations there. However, I will discuss some of them, particularly giving the transient characters relationships. Relationships give them something to go off of when interacting with other people and with the world, i.e., how their relationship with their best friend or family may impact their perception of certain types of people. Perhaps they were severely bullied by elves as a child. How would that impact how they reacted to elven NPCs or characters that were rude to them? How would that influence their perception of a tyrannical king reminiscent of their bully? How could this develop with an elven NPC in which their biases are confronted? There are many different avenues that this can go down, and this is just but a taste of what building relationships with these characters can do. The second I would recommend is something I've been going over this entire time. Give them goals. You can keep their desire for money, glory, fame. Just give them a reason why they want it. It's important to give them a reason why, so that why can give nuance to the goal. If they don't have a reason why, then it becomes extremely one-dimensional. Wanting money is the most one-dimensional thing that a person can be if there isn't a why behind it. A great example of a character that wants money, but is very nuanced and very interesting, and in my opinion, a great character is Leorio from Hunter x Hunter. This character in particular wants money. However, he has a great reason why behind it, and it drives his motivations, and it influences how he goes about talking and interacting with the different characters of the world. When you give them a reason why, not only does it give them nuance, but it gives them a reason to push forward, and it leaves room for development, which is fun, and not just for actors. Anyone's character can develop and change, just like actual people. And you don't even really need to think about it that much. You'll be playing, and then all of a sudden, your character will be thinking a different way. But that's the beauty of improv, and that's the beauty of D&D. When your character isn't doing things just because, that means there's a reason. And that means the choice can have weight behind it, which can push that character in a completely different direction, i.e., development. By definition, these things make them less transient, because they have things that connect them into the world through relationships and gives them a reason to connect to future things through their goals. This will in turn make them more interested, hopefully, in the other foundational portions of the character through these. Wanting more knowledge of the world and being more invested in the arc of the story. I found that this will increase the enjoyment of everyone in the campaign, and it will allow for people to become more invested not only in their story, but the story as a whole. That's all I have to say about that. None of this is to say that I think that anyone's particular way of playing D&D or writing characters is wrong. This is just my opinion of how people work, not just characters written on a page, but I believe that this is some innate aspects of humanity that can be transferred onto a character. And that's not to say that I think it's better. I think that it is a method. Now, you can go about doing whatever you wish as it pertains to writing or Dungeons & Dragons or any other tabletop game. But I hope you'll join us over at twitch.tv/mindflayerinc to watch as a story that I've created with all my friends, with a lot of love and compassion between all of us, unfold. But have a wonderful day, stay brilliant, and I'll see you next time.